opens, one always making top 8, and then, unfortunately for that player, being dispatched in rather comical fashion, be it a a Deathrite Shaman or being Thought Seized on turn 1
Man, Thought
or
Seized
something.
is Time Walk against that.
Yeah, it's always kind of funny when they get knocked out of the tournament just because they lose through some very strange means that other decks would not just straight lose to. But you've got Dave Thomas. He's playing just the mana version. He's got 12 lands, 4 Gemstone Mines, 3 Cephalid Coliseums, 4 City of Brass, and Undiscovered Paradise. So the new card in Mana Confluence might not work into his deck list. He might want that instead of Gemstone Mine, potentially. Would have to ask him exactly how he'd want to go. He's playing against Michael Cuevas playing Bug Delver. Going to start off with a Ponder to get our day underway.
Yeah, so Michael Cuevas is playing Bug Delver. Pretty standard list. I think generally this can be a little weaker against Dredge because instead of leaning on burn spells, it leans on discard spells, which are traditionally a little weaker against Dredge. What it does have going on for it is the 4 Deathrite Shaman in the main deck.
I think it relies very heavily on that card to actually win this matchup, however, as Cuevas is going to actually pick up a Deathrite Shaman there from the Ponder. Dave Thomas is going to cycle a Street Wraith right away, kind of revealing his hand here. There's not a lot of decks that do that effect.
Could be playing Living End.
I hadn't considered that. That is definitely something that he could be doing. He's going to start with the Cephalid Coliseum. Is he still playing Living End?
Probably not playing Living End anymore. All right.
How about now?
Lion's Eye Diamond. He correctly sequences that to play around a possible daze from Michael Cuevas.
One thing that Dave Thomas knows how to do, he has been playing Dredge for some time now. So this, his sequencing being correct does not come as much of a surprise at all. Here's a daze. He's going to pay 1 for the Lion's Eye Diamond.
Yeah, it's interesting. So Cuevas decides to daze anyway just to stop the Lion's Eye Diamond there. So to stop the Cephalid Coliseum from tapping for an extra mana. And he's going to go ahead and force as well.
Very, very aggressive use of the counter spells here. If you're Dave, you got to be pretty happy with this. And this is a really good reason why multiple Lion's Eye Diamonds. Okay, and he just passes the turn back. Wow,
yeah,
okay.
It's a good attack by Cuevas to try to counter that first LED. Sometimes a Dredge player would keep this hand even if there was only 1 Lion's Eye Diamond in it. Because Dave Thomas had 2 more, it ended up looking a little weak on Cuevas' side. But I still like how he's aggressively playing against Dredge.
So the big question here is, does Dave have some sort of Dredger in his hand at this point? Because now Deathrite Shaman has shown up. He's going to sacrifice Lion's Eye Diamond, going to discard the grip.
And that puts 7 cards in the graveyard. Once he sacrifices the next diamond, that means he can activate the Cephalid Coliseum.
So he's going to get rock and rolling. He's probably got some red mana floating there right now as well because of Faithless Looting. But right now, he says, all right, let's dredge a Stinkweed Imp. Let's get 5 cards deeper. 3 blue, 3 red. Here's an Undiscovered Paradise. Gemstone Mine, Icrid, a Bridge from Below, Cabal Therapy. So that's going to go down there. We're going to take a look here. He wants to make sure he knows exactly what's in the bin here.
Did not dredge a Dredger, so he's going to actually have to naturally draw those final 2 cards. You can see he hit a Therapy, though, and a Bridge, so relevant cards are here. He now has, 2 blue, 3 red floating, as the first one was used for Cephalid Coliseum.
So now he's going to use another blue to activate the Coliseum. He's going to dredge a Golgari Grave Troll. So here's 6 cards coming, among them a Faithless Looting, along with a Stinkweed Imp. So the next dredge will probably be Old Stinky. There's an Archmeba there that'll also come in after all of these theatrics are done. So here come 5 cards, another Bridge, another Stinkweed Imp, and a Golgari Grave Troll among them. Now, 1 more Stinky. See a Putrid, a Faithless, a Breakthrough.
Yeah, he has not hit many Narcomoebas yet, so he's really filled up his graveyard. And as you see here, he's going to dredge Faithless Looting with that trio of red mana. But he doesn't have any creatures in play yet to sacrifice to Therapy, but he does have multiple Bridges.
Now this is interesting because I thought he hit 1 Narcomoeba when he was dredging a little bit earlier.
Well, he discarded a Narcomoeba to that initial Lion's Eye Diamond.
Yep, and see, he pulled 1 out now.
Okay.
So that's exactly what happened. So he's going through the motions here, a little bit out of order, but he does pull that out there. Both players do agree. So now here's the Faithless Looting dredge. 12 cards are going to be turned over because 2 Grave Trolls will be dredged. He's looking for more Narcomoebas. He's found 1. Not sure how many Bridges are down there because his cards are all beautiful and shiny. He's been playing dredge for some time now, so he's got a beautiful version of the deck. There are a couple of Bridges that are hanging out down there, I'm sure. There's a couple of Cabal Therapies.
Two, so we have 1 Bridge in that pile.
You see him spreading through his cards here. He's looking for Bridges and Therapies. He knows that he's got Icrids that he can bring back eventually. But what the important thing here is, Matthias, is that even if he can't, quote, go off, unquote, this turn, he's got enough cards in his graveyard that Deathrite Shaman just doesn't matter.
Right.
That's the important part.
He can tear apart Cuevas' hand thanks to Cabal Therapy. And he has enough Bridges that he's actually generating additional creatures when he does it.
So we'll see what other motions he's going to go through here. He's going to cast a Cabal Therapy, sacrifice a Narcomoeba, probably send that upstairs to Cuevas. We'll see what card he wants to name. Is there are a couple bridge triggers, and he's going through the graveyard to see how many bridges there are. Again, it looks like there are 3 now because he pulls 2 from there, and there's one in the stack up there. So looks like there are 3 triggers. So that's probably 3 zombies. There you do see Narcomoeba. A very obscure card, just a 2-mana 1/1 flyer, but it is built for this strategy.
Exactly. You see these future sight cards, certainly among the stranger abilities to put on a creature.
I agree. But they are pretty cool. And it does enable this deck when you do dredge a ton of cards. So 3 zombies are going to come into play from that Narcomoeba dying to Cabal Therapy. So there's those 3. Again, he probably has another Cabal Therapy in his graveyard that he can flashback for the other Narcomoeba, assuming that he does want to do that. Not sure if he turned over a Dread Return. He only has 1 in his deck list, and he doesn't have anything insane to get back. We've seen versions that do have a card like Flamekin Zealot, Flare of the Hatebound, Gristlebrand in some occasions to be able to really combo off. But his is a more honest version, which is a ridiculous thing to say.
It's just going to reanimate a Grave Troll, or maybe not even Dread Return anything particular into play and just beat up with zombies.
Yeah, and that's what I think he's probably going to do this game, because at this point he's overwhelmed the Deathrite Shaman. You know, Cuevas can take a look at the graveyard all he wants to. It's like, you can't remove all of my dredges, of course. You can't remove my bridges with Deathrite Shaman, because that's not something a Deathrite can actually do. And then you can remove, one of my Icarids if you'd like, but I believe Thomas has more than one of those down there, so you can really just build an incremental advantage that way.
I mean, the thing is that Bug Delver is a deck that's very ill-equipped to deal with 6 2/2s, to be completely honest.
Yeah, this isn't a version that has Pernicious Deed. Most Bug Delver decks don't. If we go into Bug Control territory, they do, but for Bug Delver in particular, yeah, this isn't something that they have. And you saw Thomas actually name Abrupt Decay with the Cabal Therapy. The reason for that is because if Cuevas could actually Abrupt Decay his own creature, he would remove the bridges from the graveyard, and that's very important for Thomas's game plan.
Exactly. It looks like Thomas did not have another therapy. He chose to leave that Narcomoeba in play.
There goes old Icarid. But that's only one of, I think, 3 that are down there, so not going to solve the entire problem with Deathrite Shaman. And here comes back Icarid.
Cuevas is going to go ahead and hit an Icarid there. He hit it on his turn with Deathrite Shaman so that it couldn't get removed. Couldn't come back and be hasty. However, there's 2 more Icarids in Thomas's yard. They're eating the Street Wraiths that have been placed there. So now we're going to have 6 creatures attacking. And remember, when these Icarids die, it's a whole nother slew of zombies on the battlefield.
Yeah, it says end of turn sacrifice them. So as a result, more zombies are actually going to come. And now we're going to add even more because he turned over another bridge below his 4th one. A couple therapies from this dredge on the Golgari Grave Troll as well. So Thomas will have 1 card in his hand as he does attack with all of these creatures. You're going to see an attack here for 3, 6, 7. Plus 6 is 13. And Cuevas is going to go down a little bit further. Here's a therapy. Gonna sacrifice the Icarid to cast that. You're gonna see 4 bridge from below triggers. There goes the Tarmogoyf. Cuevas left with just a land in his hand.
Yeah, so at this point, that is going to be 8 more zombies on the battlefield. No sweeper out of Bug Delver, and surely the next attack is going to be lethal from Thomas.
I'd imagine that's the case, as Cabal Therapy is going to get flashback yet again. Thomas is going to get 4 more zombies. As you mentioned, 8 total. You count the 3 that are in play. That's 11, plus a lonely jellyfish, Narcomoeba, and after a Brainstorm is drawn here, he might try to cast that. I'm not sure there's anything he can find, though, and he's just going to concede the game instead.
All right, well, as is often the case in Legacy, game 1 for the Dredge player goes to Dredge.
That's not too surprising. I don't know if you were here with me during coverage when we watched Dave Thomas actually mulligan down to 2 and win a game with Dredge. It was either you or Osip. It was last year. We actually watched him just mulligan all the way down to 2 and then cobble together a draw where he actually went off on turn 3.
Yep, I mean, as recent as last week on camera here, I was on the receiving end of one of those draws from Dredge. And I think you were there for that.
I was there.
That is one of the decks that mulligans the best in Legacy, or maybe just in Magic. It really doesn't care about what the cards in his hand because it's going to discard them all anyway.
Yeah, I mean, we called a lot of people when they describe Dredge as they're playing a different game. They're not even really playing Magic. Their graveyard is an extension of their hand. It might as well just be their hand. They get to draw 6 cards a turn or 5 cards a turn with Golgari Grave Troll or Stinkweed Imp. That's effectively what they're doing. It's a very different brand of Magic, especially if you've never seen it before. And so what Dave Thomas did there was just a little bit different. But his deck able to win game number 1. You see he's sitting at 3-0 in what is definitely a favorable game 1 matchup. But we'll take a look at Cuevas' sideboard. He's got to have some help here, right?
Yeah, well, I mean, Dredge's game 1s are so good that if its game 2s were close to its game 1s, it would be the best deck in the format, but there is a lot of hate that it has trouble interacting with. And so let's look at the cards that Michael Cuevas has that can interact with Dredge. So looking at his sideboard, we start out with, he has a surgical extraction in his sideboard and a Graft Digger's Cage.
Those are good steps.
Those are great steps. They actively hate the graveyard. He certainly will be using those. On top of that, there's some other cards that certainly have applications, mainly because there's a lot of dead cards in this matchup for a deck like Bug Delver. He, for example, has a Toxic Deluge in his board. That's something that could, in theory, kill zombies. It's also something that could kill a creature and therefore eliminate Bridge from Belows. He has Spell Pierce that can counter one of the, say if Dredge keeps a hand that needs a Faithless Looting or a Careful Study to go off, it can certainly counter that spell. Swan Song fulfills the same role, so could Flusterstorm. And so he has like a lot of cards that have some interaction. He probably boards in all of them just because of the number of dead cards he has here.
Yeah, he's got to have a boatload of dead cards, right? That just don't really do a lot. There are times where discard spells actually do anything. I think him is going to be bad a high percentage of the time, but I wouldn't be surprised if a card like Thoughtseize is actually pretty good, especially because he's on the play. How do you feel about Abrupt Decay? Because you can kill your own creature with it.
Yeah, you can kill your own creature to get rid of Bridge from Belows. Obviously, that's not a really appealing reason. But like I said, there's just so many dead creatures on Cuevas' side that, yeah, the card does something. So I think you'd at least want to keep in some number of that card when you compare it to something like Liliana of the Veil in the matchup, or even Tombstalker. These are cards that just don't exist in the matchup. You're never going to have time to cast them, and they aren't really going to do anything when you do.
We take a look at the other side here. David Thomas, again, up a game here with his Dredge deck. This is always the interesting thing, because every time you look at a Dredge sideboard, you know, it do these really cheap effects that try to hate effects that are good against them. For example, 4 copies of Nature's Claim. That'll be used to try to break up cards like Relic of Progenitus and other options like that. You see 3 copies of Pithing Needle, 3 copies of Firestorm, an additional Undiscovered Paradise, so he can board up to a 13th land, a Dread Return, an Iona Shield of Miriam, an Elish Norn, and then an Ashen Rider. So he's got these 3 singletons along with additional copy of Dread Return to be able to accelerate and Dread Return into a big threat that is presumably unbeatable. I think, well, this is actually a good question. Would you rather want Firestorm or Pithing Needle to try to be Deathrite Shaman?
Really
Assuming that's
either.
your goal with one of those cards.
It's an interesting question. Could really be either way. I think they both accomplish the same goal. I'd probably want Firestorm, I guess, because it also kills Delver of Secrets, but that's not a great reason.
Yeah, I mean, you know, Needle is kind of weird because, like, once you stick it, it's pretty good, but at the same time, you know, it can be killed by Abrupt Decay, assuming that Cuevas does leave those in. Firestorm, the fact that it can kill Delver, I think, is actually probably a selling point in its favor. I'm not sure if Thomas wants to play this additional land either in the additional copy of Undiscovered Paradise. You know, that's the kind of question when you see sideboards like this and you're not familiar with how Legacy players sideboard with their Dredge deck. I know when I used to play Dredge in Extended, which is a much different archetype than this particular version is, sideboarding was actually really, really difficult with the deck, and it's something you had to actually learn how to do, because if you just look at a sideboard for a Dredge deck, it seems kind of obvious of like, I would like Nature's Claim against these, you know, anti-graveyard effects, but what am I sideboarding out? How many am I sideboarding in? Am I even mulliganing for these cards? Like, those are some real questions here that I know Thomas knows because he's played this deck a ton, but it's actually pretty hard to analyze exactly when you're supposed to board in, you know, these Silver Bullet big creatures. When am I supposed to board in the Firestorms versus the Pithing Needle versus both?
Yeah, well, remember, Dredge is a deck that only plays, 12 lands.
Yep.
Most of its spells are not paid for with mana, so they either need to be, if you want to board in a spell, it either needs to cost 1, or it needs to be able to be cast out of the graveyard or be relevant in a graveyard. So yeah, most of your spells, if you want to cast them, do have to be in your opener, as you tend to have a 0-card hand by about turn 3.
Cuevas looks like he's taking a mulligan here. The other thing, too, with this matchup is, and the matches against Dredge in general, is that both players are actually going to take a decent amount of mulligans. David Thomas's deck mulligans quite well, but the Bug Delver deck, they need to kind of mulligan aggressively for their cards. I wouldn't be surprised if he's just looking for either 1 Force of Will or 2 Deathrite Shaman.
Yeah, Force of Will, Deathrite Shaman, even something like Graft Digger's Cage would be pretty relevant here. You want to mulligan to some sort of hate card against Dredge.
Let's see if he found one. Yes, he did. There's a hate card.
All right, Deathrite Shaman in play. He has a Wasteland as well. That actually can be relevant to this matchup, as sometimes Thomas will frequently keep 1-landers.
Here's a Faithless Looting off a City of Brass. Thomas is going to go down to 19. He'll draw 2 cards. We'll see if he can discard 2 Dredgers.
For him, he's hoping to discard at least 1. You see Golgari Thug in his hand.
And a Stinkweed up. The reason I mentioned 2 Dredgers is because he's just got to work 1 through the Deathrite Shaman.
Right.
And especially because it's a Tropical Island that's in play, it can remove a creature. Ooh, he's got a Surgical in his hand, too. What a great mulligan for Michael.
Yeah, so he can actually get rid of both the Dredgers with Deathrite Shaman and Surgical Extraction. That'll set David Thomas back at least 1 turn, if not more.
Yeah, I mean, what Michael's turn could be this turn is, all right, Deathrite Shaman, eat your Golgari Thug, Surgical your Stinkweed Imps, because that's the better dredger of the two, and then Wasteland your Cydia Brass.
Yeah. Well, also, Thug is, I believe, not a 4 of in the deck.
3 Thugs.
Okay.
3 Thugs. Typically not a 4 of, though. There are definitely better dredgers in the deck in Grave Troll and Stinkweed Imp. Actually just going to deploy a Tarmogoyf. I'm a little surprised by that.
He's giving him an extra turn here. This does mean that the dredge engine is going to be able to move.
I think the thought process here is I can probably catch you off guard with Surgical Extraction, but that's a real risk, right? Of just letting that thing be there?
I would think so, but I haven't played this from the Bug Delver side. So Stinkweed Imp is going to be dredged by Thomas, and there's another Stinkweed Imp placed in the graveyard.
One.
It's a putrid, two Putrid Imps and a Stinkweed Imp. So many Imps in the yard. 1 Narcomoeba as well.
There's a Surgical. And he's actually going to go Surgically Narcomoeba.
Yeah, Surgical and Narcomoeba I'm not as big of a fan of. Remember that the dredge deck can, if it needs to, just start casting creatures. You can cast a Golgari Thug. It's kind of awkward, but it's not game losing.
Again, it's not to say that, the line of play that I brought up a little bit earlier is correct. It's hard to say. I mean, again, how many times have, you played against Dredge and Legacy where you've played a lot of sideboarding games and you know exactly what you're supposed to use your Surgicals on. It's very easy to say, okay, yeah, you can just take care of the Stinkweed Imps and then I can eat the Thug and Wasteland your land, but, that might not equate to a win, right, by itself.
Depends what the rest of your hand is, absolutely. So 3 Narcomoebas were taken. Looks like the 4th Narcomoeba has been boarded out here.
No, 4th one's up top.
The 4th one up top?
Yeah.
Okay.
3 out of the deck, and then the one that
there
was
we go.
the one that was.
I was gonna say, I was like, that's strange if the 4th one is boarded out, but
that means he knows more about Dredge than we do.
Yeah, certainly.
So after that does resolve, again, the Narcomoebas are exiled. There's a Thug and a Faithless Looting in the bin. Stinkweed to the grip, and then the other cards were dredged. So again, Thomas has a window that is open here, and we'll see if he can take advantage of it, because it looks like he does have a copy of Breakthrough in his hand. And even though he doesn't have Narcomoebas to dredge to, he can still do a really, really nice turn here. He's going to start by casting Cabal Therapy. Probably going to name Force of Will, but we'll get confirmation on what he is naming.
Yeah, Force of Will, one of the highest impact cards against Dredge.
There's a hand of Abrupt Decay and Brainstorm. And he actually named Daze in this situation. I guess if it's Force of Will, it has to be, it has to be Force of Will and blue card, right? It would have to be an actual perfect
Daze is more
mulligan.
likely.
Yeah.
We do see there's a second land in Thomas's hand as Encephalid Coliseum. Not sure if he has a third land. He will need at least a second, if not a third. There is a Wasteland on Cuevas' side of the board.
Yeah, the second land right now is actually, the third land is Undiscovered Paradise. He does have one of those in his hand. He's going to lead with the Coliseum and take 1. I wouldn't be surprised if he's just breaking through and just trying to really dump a ton of cards into the graveyard here. He's going to need to start with a favorable dredge. But I guess he does have 2 dredgers down there. So here's Stinkweed for 5 cards. And he starts immediately off with 2 Grave Trolls. Actually 3, so 18 cards coming.
Yeah, so it's draw 4, discard all but X cards.
Yep. X
so
is
draw
0.
4, discard your hand.
There's a Dread Return. Couple of Vicarids. The card I'm looking for right now most is Bridge from Below.
Yeah, remember with no Narcomoebas here, what's going to have to happen is if Dave Thomas wants to get creatures in play, they're going to have to be either hard cast dredgers like Golgari Thug or Stinkweed Imp, or they're going to have to be Icarids that have come out of the graveyard. And what's really problematic here is that Abrupt Decay that's in Cuevas' hand, so he'll be able to remove all these Bridge from Belows.
So long as he knows the interaction.
So long as he knows to do it.
Yeah. That's the important part here, because Deathrite Shaman right now is being taxed again, because you take a look at Cuevas' hand, he doesn't have like an Underground Sea or a fetch land in his hand to be able to search for black mana. So it wouldn't surprise me if Cuevas is interested in maybe activating Deathrite Shaman to be able to remove a creature from the bin, when it might be important to use Deathrite Shaman for mana to be able to cast Abrupt Decay on
itself.
it. Yeah, on itself, yep. Also, let's not forget about that Wasteland, because that Wasteland's probably checked in to take care of the Coliseum now.
I mean, you have a chance right here to get rid of Cephalid Coliseum. I have to imagine you're going to take it.
Yeah. All right, there's a Brainstorm.
Well, if he can find another land, this Brainstorm is just profit.
That's 3 cards, and none of them were a land. Among those cards, there was a Golgari Charm that was drawn. Stifle, too. Stifle could be interesting now.
Yeah, he could stifle an Icarid trigger.
Could Stifle Coliseum.
Stifle
Tries to bust it.
Could definitely stifle Coliseum. Though I think that the Wasteland is still just has its sights set on Coliseum.
I would think so. I definitely agree with you on that. 2 cards are going to go back here from the Brainstorm. It's not going to be a perfect one because there is no fetch land, so he's going to be Brainstorm locked right now. But that's not as important or not as like backbreaking as it normally would be because right now he's got a 6/7 Tarmogoyf that's attacking. And now Deathrite Shaman just kind of hanging back.
So he's going to pass back. So Thomas is going to get to have this Coliseum. I think more importantly, Thomas is going to get these Icarids with the Bridge from Below's in the graveyard.
Yeah. He's going to get back even more Icarids. So look at him go. Moving some black creatures.
Let's see, how many bridges
there's at least one. At least one. I'm not sure if there's more than one, but he found one very early in the game. I think there was one in his opening hand when he discarded.
Yeah, and there's a Dread Return in there too. Without that green mana up, Dread Return could target something here.
Oh, I'm gonna see maybe a little stifle action on the 3rd Icarid trigger. Okay.
All right, so the 3rd Icarid does not get the chance to come back into play. Cuevas appears like he's trying to keep Thomas off of Dread Return.
Yeah, that's what it looks like to me too. Thug is going to get dredged, I think, with the thought process of am I going to get to cast it? Yeah.
Absolutely. You see a Bridge from Below dredged there from the Thug.
Yep. And the only reason he's able to cast this card right now is because he wasn't wastelanded. Cuevas is going to take what looks like 6 here from Icarids. And I think we might just see Iona come back now.
Well, I would think that he'd cast Iona here, or cast Dread Return targeting Iona. Not only does he get all these zombies from his creatures, but he gets to have an Iona in play.
And you have to imagine that somewhere there was probably a misstep here with the Wasteland. It seems like it had to be cast at some point, right?
Well, I would think you'd want to, yeah, the fact that Thomas got to play a 3rd creature here turns out to be pretty relevant. Well, not as relevant. I almost think that what needed to happen was these bridges needed to be taken out.
Did you be nuked?
Yeah, because, I mean, Thomas, you can't keep Thomas off 3 creatures because he can sack the Icarids to Cabal Therapies, get zombies, use zombies to make Dread Return on Iona. So keeping Thomas off 3 creatures seems pretty difficult.
This is going to be a Dread Return. Again, we're going to use the flashback mode. Sacrifice 3 creatures. So he sacrifices an Icrid, a Golgari Thug, and a zombie. Bridge triggers for the real creatures will resolve. Those will come into play, and it looks like Iona's going to come back. I suppose it could be a large... Wow. Wow.
It's like, yeah, what you'd...
Okay. I thought he was getting a Putrid, but he's resolving the Thug trigger. When Thug dies, you put a creature back on top of your deck. Okay.
Right. So puts a creature on top of his deck with Thug, and 3 those creatures are sacked to bring Iona into play. And Iona is naming black. That's the only color that can, I think, in theory, kill the Iona.
Yes. If there was some kind of off-the-wall blue effect here, that would work, but I don't expect to see that happen, so...
Yeah, and now a army on Thomas's side may prove to be too much. Except remember, Bug Delver doesn't actually play any sweepers, main or board.
Yep. No, the card I always think of is Pernicious Deed. There is a Toxic Deluge.
There's one Toxic Deluge, but it's black.
So not casting that.
So there are functionally no sweepers in the deck.
I guess, yeah, I keep mentioning Deed, but he couldn't cast that either. So black, definitely the best name in this situation. A couple Icarids are going to come back here. And this is really just Dredge working all cylinders. And it's kind of funny because over the course of the Open series here, through Season 1, through the beginning of Season 2, we've kind of talked about how Dredge is a deck that no one has really been preparing for a ton. We haven't seen a lot of hate, no real Leyline of the Voids in people's sideboards, anything like that. And, you know, with a skilled Dredge pilot, they could really take a tournament by storm. And it wouldn't surprise me to see Thomas do that on this particular weekend because he's very, very good at playing Dredge, first of all. And second of all, just the hate has been very low in people's sideboards over the course of the year.
You see only 2 sideboard graveyard hate cards for Cuevas' deck. That's pretty low.
Yeah, what is it? It's Surgical and Grafdigger's Cage? That's it?
Yeah, one of each.
Yeah, and yes, he does have main deck Deathrite Shamans, but you saw that particular game, Thomas was able to actually overwhelm a Deathrite Shaman.
Yep, he's able to overwhelm a Deathrite Shaman. He actually was able to win through the Surgical as well. Surgical hit Narc Amoeba, and that hardly slowed him down.
Yeah, he pushed right through that pretty easily, and that's why he's moving on to 4-0. Again, David Thomas with Dredge, a deck that he used to help himself top 8 an Invitational back in Atlanta a couple of years back. starting off here in Dallas 4-0 with the deck that he knows best, taking down Michael Cuevas playing Bug Delver in what I believe is probably a favorable matchup for Dredge. I don't know if it's as one-sided as it looked in that game, but it definitely feels like that's a good matchup for Dredge.
Well, I think one of the advantages to Delver is that it doesn't have any truly bad matchups, but yeah, it does seem to be advantageous for Dredge. I think Rug Delver is a much closer matchup as burn spells have a lot more interaction against Dredge than, say, Thought Seizes do.
Yep.
But nonetheless, a lot of your matchup against Dredge is determined by what your hate cards look like, and Cuevas only brought two today in his sideboard. That proved to not be enough against Dredge.
Yeah, I think what I'm going to do